This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
Liverpool 2, Aston Villa 1. Well, they left that one late. Liverpool finally getting back to winning ways at Anfield after Trent Alexander-Arnold popped up in stoppage time. Welcome to the Debrief live here on the Blood Red channel. I'm Clarke, Matt Addison alongside me as we bring you instant reaction to Liverpool's win over Aston Villa. And well, Matt, I'll start by saying Trent just can't keep himself out the headlines right now, can he?
No, he certainly can't. Obviously, the England boss, Gareth Southgate, was in attendance at Anfield, and I'm sure, for the majority of that match, he was probably feeling vindicated, to be honest. It wasn't Trent's best performance in the world, certainly. I suppose you could say that for the entirety of this Liverpool team. But, of course, at the end, he pops up with that massive moment, the real, genuine piece of quality from him, Steven Gerrard-esque, really, with that late goal from that sort of position. And, that is the reason that we all think that Trent Alexander-Arnold should be in England squad, because he's got the ability to come up with those moments. As I say, he wasn't having the best game in the world. He, didn't have a huge influence on that match, but he stepped up when it mattered. And I think for England, that's something that you've got to look at and think you'd probably quite like a piece of that.
It was a weird game, wasn't it? It didn't seem to sort of follow the pattern that Liverpool have been setting at Anfield of not looking like scoring. First half, they seemed to have so many chances but couldn't put one away. The classic sucker punch comes right at the end of the half. We'll get onto VAR in a bit, but then Salah does get a goal. After that, it seemed as though Liverpool stopped playing, though, having already in the game created so many chances. Yeah,
it was a really strange one. I mean, they should have been out of sight, really, in that first half. I thought they were creating chances, or certainly Aston Villa were sort of creating chances for them. You think of, the 1v1 for Mohamed Salah, 9 times out of 10, that goes in. But the way it's been going for Liverpool at Anfield, you weren't massively surprised that he'd missed that. There was, other chances that you thought, eventually they would take one. But then, of course, at the other end, you do leave yourself susceptible if you don't take those opportunities against, a team as good as Villa with, some of the players that they've got, I think, are fantastic. Obviously, Ollie Watkins, the pick, really, with the goal. And, I think Liverpool should defend it better. Addison should do better with the goal. But it's one of those where you kind of looked at it and thought, they deserved it almost for not taking the chances at the other end. So, yeah, it was a frustrating one. But then, as you say, they get themselves back level. And you just expect them to take that next step up, take a few more chances, try and, flood bodies forward and try and, get another goal to go and win it. And it didn't look like it was going to happen. As you say, that with all of the chances really for Liverpool, certainly the clear-cut ones came in the first half, and you thought their best chance to get those goals had already been gone. But yeah, Trent Alexander-Arnold pops up, and it's a huge moment, I think, in the top 4 race. Certainly the Premier League table looks a lot healthier for Liverpool than, well, even had they not got a winner, even if they'd have only got a point, they wouldn't have moved up into that 4th position. And I think, that's a huge boost for them. But it does make it that extra little bit surprising, I think, that they didn't try and kick on and get that win, because today was a must-win game, I think, for Liverpool. And they did leave it very, very late to do that.
You mentioned it there in terms of the top 4 race, Chelsea playing Crystal Palace shortly. How big do you think that goal could well be in the context of Liverpool's whole season?
I think it's massive. I mean, the only thing that stops me saying that this is the turning point is that we've been here before, haven't we? We've seen Liverpool win. The last time they won at Anfield, we thought that was, a turning point, and, Roberto Firmino was going to be back to his best and all of that sort of thing when they beat Tottenham back in December, but it didn't quite happen. There's been a few sort of moments, between then that you've thought that they, should be able to kick on. You think of the wins over RB Leipzig, for example, but then they've sort of, been curtailed in their efforts to kick on. I think they have to put together a run of form now to get into the top 4. It's not going to be easy, but the fact that they've got those 2 extra points, really, that it didn't look like they were going to get until late on is absolutely massive. I mean, it just sort of puts the pressure on the other teams around them. I think that's as big a thing as anything else, to be honest. Liverpool are not, anywhere near playing their best football today, but I think if you're, even somebody as high as Leicester, I think if you're looking behind and you've got a team who are, let's face it, capable of playing a lot better than what they've been showing. If you're Leicester, you're Chelsea, you're West Ham, you're looking around now and you've got essentially, a Premier League champion chasing you down, which is probably not the most comfortable position to be in. So yeah, it was absolutely huge. Look, the performances, if they play like that every week from now to the end of the season, but keep getting wins, that's absolutely fine. But I think Liverpool will have to improve in terms of certainly their finishing, but they've just given themselves a huge opportunity now. And I think, particularly after the disappointment midweek, it was massive for them to bounce back. And, as much as I do keep saying it, the result was the biggest thing for Liverpool today. And as much as they left it late, they have ultimately got that job done.
115 days, isn't it, since Liverpool last won there at Anfield? Crikey, I can't believe we're saying that, but what a relief. I suppose that's the overall feeling, isn't it, at the end, is relief that Liverpool have got back to winning ways at Anfield, given when you sort of thought late on there, Jurgen Klopp bringing off Kabak, throwing on Shaqiri. He's done that change a couple of times recently, but it does sort of show the desperation that Jurgen Klopp still has to make it into fourth place and into the Champions League next season through the Premier League.
Yeah, it was the absolute minimum requirement, wasn't it, for Liverpool coming into this season? I mean, we all know the reasons why they've not been at their level, but I think even with the injuries, there's no real excuse for them not to be a top four team, or certainly very, very close to that. So, look, they needed to get something today. They needed to change things. I thought it was a little bit strange with the substitution to take off Roberto Firmino. I actually thought he played probably his best game for a long time, really, to be honest. He looked bright. He obviously not should, because it was just offside, but I'm sure we'll touch on VAR very shortly. But he could very, very easily, shall we say, have got himself on the score sheet. Played, generally very, very well, and I think he did really, really well today. So I think that was a bit of a strange one that he came off. But yeah, as you say, it shows the desperation. I think Ozan Kabak now has come off a couple of times, just as much as anything, because Liverpool were desperate to get something, and Shaqiri, I think he was involved, wasn't he, at some point in that move that led to that winning goal. So, yeah, in fact, he was, wasn't it? It was his cross.
Thiago's
passing
header,
it back to him. Yeah, so, it's obviously paid off for Liverpool. I thought the first substitution was a bit strange, but the second one, I suppose you can say, Jurgen Klopp was vindicated.
Yeah, definitely. Let's talk about VAR then. You're saying there he got the right call, millimetres, I think it was. Are we not going to reach a stage where this just needs to be feet on the floor, and that's where the line's drawn from? There was one very not too dissimilar really in the Fulham Wolves game last night, and Nuno Espirito Santo, I thought, came out with the best quote on it all season. He sort of said, well, next season we'll have thousands of fans back in these stadiums. You try selling it to them that these calls are the right calls for the game, because I know we're talking from a Liverpool point of view, and we would have been rubbing our hands with glee had it been Ozan Kabak holding a high line and Ollie Watkins offside, but it's not in the spirit of it, is it?
No, it's not. I mean, it's a much more difficult situation, I think, than a lot of people will look at it and say it's just wrong. You should just get rid of it. I mean, the difficulty is you do literally have to draw that line somewhere. You have to have a cut-off point, and if they made the margin of error slightly bigger, I mean, there's always going to be a case of if it was one more millimetre, that's always going to be there. Just the nature of the decision that's got to be made. But yeah, it's such a frustrating one. And I think the thing for Liverpool, particularly this season, is it just seems to have happened to them so frequently. It seems to happen to Liverpool more frequently than any other team. And I think that's partly because of the sort of high intensity, very sort of slim margins that they play to in attack and defence. They're very much playing on the last line. They're trying to get in behind, and at the same time, when they're out of possession, they are very, very high up the pitch. So yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, it's one of those where ultimately that will now hopefully get a little bit forgotten, because obviously Liverpool have gone on to win, and that was the big story. But yeah, ultimately VAR, even if it's not for this one, it's going to be a talking point moving forward. And that was the exact opposite of the reason it was supposed to come in, wasn't it? It's supposed to sort of cut out the big sort of howler of decisions from referees. And I think if we hadn't have been shown today the lines being drawn and how close it was and all of that, everybody would have just accepted that was onside. So that is the frustration. But the solution for me is a very, very difficult one. And it's not obviously for us to make that call, but I think for today, in terms of the VAR argument, you'd rather steer clear as much as possible from that and try and talk about the football, because ultimately that is the sort of crux of the argument when it comes to VAR, almost, is that it takes away from the talking point. So let's stick to the football, try and avoid VAR as much as possible, even though it's only a matter of time before that gets brought up again.
You mentioned before Roberto Firmino. He looked as though he was certainly, he looked well for the rest, should I say, that Jurgen Klopp had given him, and the fact that he got the start. Same can't probably be said for Sadio Mane. He still looked rusty when he came on.
He did. He almost hindered Liverpool in terms of giving the ball away and not really doing a great deal. He seemed to be playing a very central role, didn't he, Mane? He was coming very deep. He was almost doing that Roberto Firmino role at times, dropping into Liverpool's half. And he's one of those, I said it before, Liverpool playing on that last line, playing on the shoulder and taking those risks. That's where you want him. You want him out wide. You want him on the shoulder of the last defender. And we just didn't quite see that. I mean, we all know the issues with him. It's been fatigue. It's been mentally as much as physically. He's just not in great form. But you've got to keep playing him. I think he will play midweek. I think you've got to keep him in the team for Real Madrid, just because you think a player of his quality will turn it around at some point. He will sort of come back into form. I mean, looking at Real Madrid midweek, I think there's a good argument, I think, to go with Firmino, Mane, Salah and Jota all from the start and just sort of go for it, given the position that Liverpool are in. And there is obviously a good case for leaving Mane out, because he didn't do a great deal, as I say, today. But it's one of those where you just think you've got to stick with him, because we know how good he can be. We know how influential he can be. And he is one of the players that can score goals for Liverpool. And they don't have a huge number of options to come in instead of him. So it's a really, really tricky situation, I think, for Liverpool to know what to do. But I'd be surprised if he wasn't in the team for the Champions League midweek. And I think that just sort of underlines, the quality that he can have, even if he's not maybe showing it at this moment in time.
Yeah, that one talking point then ahead of that game. What about the race for top four then before we go? How confident are you now, Matt, heading into sort of the final few weeks of the Premier League season after Real Madrid, a trip to Leeds on next Monday night, Newcastle United at Anfield, then potentially a Champions League semi-final, albeit it looks unlikely at this stage, before a trip to Old Trafford. It very much, I suppose, is game by game. And at the moment, Liverpool know that they can't really afford any slips.
No, they can't. That's the thing. They've got to be consistent, and they've got to kick on from this. I said, when they scored the equaliser today, they've got to kick on and improve their performance. And that sort of stands really, as much as it was for in this individual game, it stands for the final 7 games of this season. They've got to put together a run. I think they've probably got to win, I would say, at least 5 of those matches, which is more than doable when you look at the fixture list. I think the big thing that will stand them in good stead is you look at the fixtures of the other teams. I think Chelsea have got a couple of difficult ones coming up. They play a couple of teams around them. I'm pretty sure West Ham's next couple of games are Chelsea and then Leicester potentially. So the other teams around them are not going to be able to pick up points necessarily at the same rate that Liverpool can. So I'm fairly confident, certainly a hell of a lot more confident than I was 20 minutes ago, put it that way. But it's one of those that as long as Liverpool do their own job, they do, get 5-6 wins from the last 7, which is more than doable for them. They can get into that top 4, but they've got to back it up essentially. And obviously the next game, Leeds United, is a really, really difficult one. We've seen earlier today, of course, what they've done. They've gone to Manchester City and won. So they're clearly, a huge threat for Liverpool. But Liverpool, we know they are a much better team than what they've shown. But if they can just grind out a couple of results between now and the end of the season, maybe put on a performance in a couple of the others, they should be all right. But who knows? This season, it's one of those, isn't it? You wouldn't bet against a VAR decision going against them on the last day to deny them the way it's gone.
No, you certainly wouldn't. Well, Trent stepping up then in Liverpool's hour of need to give them the advantage and put them ahead of the pack this weekend in the race for top 4 finish in the Premier League. I've been Guy Clarke, Matt Addison alongside me here on the Debrief. Stick with us on the Blood Red channel. Jurgen Klopp's post-match press conference to come. So too, Dean Smith from Aston Villa. That's all we've got time for now, though. Thanks for your time and your company. It's bye for now.
This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.